This year's ADA Scientific Sessions was packed with exciting tech announcements and cutting-edge research on treating and even curing type 1 diabetes. New tubeless pumps were demoed, we saw an implantable continuous blood glucose monitor, and we even got more details on an upcoming dual glucose-ketone sensor. And today, we're getting into all of that and more. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here, I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and research. If you're not following the show yet, make sure you do. And if you want the latest in diabetes tech and news, subscribe to our newsletter at diabetech.info or click the link in the show notes. Today, I'm joined by Gary Scheiner, a certified diabetes educator who has lived with type 1 diabetes for nearly 40 years. He's the owner and clinical director of Integrated Diabetes Services, a practice that focuses on intensive insulin therapy and advanced diabetes education for kids and adults. I'll actually be using their services soon to clean up some of my DIY loop settings, so as soon as I do that, I'll let you know how it goes. Gary and I get into all of the awesome tech that we saw at this year's ADA. Also, Gary breaks down a ton of exciting research, from updates on islet cell therapies to new ultra-concentrated insulins and the potential to use the hormone Amylin alongside existing medications. We talk about all of that, and there's so much more I couldn't fit into this intro, but it is a good one. You do not want to miss it. Keep in mind that this show is not medical advice, it's for educational purposes only. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. Let's get into it. Gary, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you here. Are you recouped from ADA?
I will never be recouped from ADA. It's like eternal jet lag. It's a fulfilling, enlightening meeting, but exhausting. You just have stuff coming at you from all directions, research and new products and developments, and it's coming at you fast and furious. So yeah, I try to take notes and break them down when I get back to the office.
Yeah, for me, it kind of feels like an amusement park where there's just all these cool booths and signs, and you want to just run up and see all the tech. And then there's all these people, and then, yeah, it's a lot of energy that you need to put out, but you also receive just like so much cool information, and the energy you get from the people there, the passions and the excitement is just like, it's so rewarding. And I saw you in and out of the conference, and there was a lot.
We got to sit down for, I think, maybe 5 or 6 minutes of our time we got to share, which was nice. And we said, let's just take a breather, sit down, chat, just relax a little bit. I mean, we both needed that at that moment in time.
That was perfect. And I thought you would be a great person to come on and talk about all of these advancements and the research. And there's a lot of technology I want to get into, but then I know that you went to a lot of sessions and learned a lot about care, treatment, updates in that area that I don't cover. So I'm excited to have you here to kind of go through all those. But I want to start with one of the pieces of tech that I'm very excited for, but I also am a little confused. And I think you can add some clarity there. So it's Abbotts, who makes Freestyle Libre, their dual ketone glucose sensor. So there's a lot of buzz about it. They actually started talking about this in 2022. They had announced their line of Lingo devices that would measure all these different things at CES in 2022. Well, now, over the past few months, there are now 4 partners that say they will integrate this sensor. Why do we need this sensor? What could a ketone glucose sensor do for us?
Well, you probably know, having lived with diabetes, ketones are not a good thing when they build up in large amounts. I mean, we usually have a little bit of ketone present in the bloodstream on an ongoing basis, and that's not a problem. We do use it as an energy source, but when ketones build up in large amounts, they can become toxic. They have acidic properties to them, so they make the bloodstream acidic and the body's fluids and tissues acidic. And there's certain parts of and functions of our body that just don't work when the pH level drops just a slight bit. So it can make you very sick. It can even be lethal if it goes on for long enough. So ketones are something we have to guard against. And when we have type 1 diabetes specifically, ketones are a very real possibility if we run out of insulin in our bodies. And those who are using injections, as long as they take their long-acting insulin every day, it's not going to happen. But if you forget your shot, you're going to have no insulin working certain phases of the day between mealtime shots. And for anybody on a pump, something that interferes with the insulin delivery or the absorption, or if the insulin spoils, you only have rapid acting insulin in your body. So within a few hours, you're going to run out of insulin. And when you run out of insulin, that's when ketone production accelerates and blood sugars go very high. We become dehydrated on top of it. And that causes ketoacidosis. So the whole concept here is that if we can catch or detect a rise in ketones, just knowing that it's climbing can cue us in that we may have forgotten to take our insulin, or our insulin has spoiled, or there might be some issue with our pump or infusion site. So it gives us the ability to troubleshoot really quickly. It's kind of like a light on your car. If the the engine light comes on or the tire pressure, you can fix it before you get into a nasty accident. It's the same here. If you know your ketones are starting to climb, you can fix that problem, A, before you run high sugars for an ungodly long time, and B, before it progresses to ketoacidosis. So that's the benefit of having ketones monitored along with glucose levels. Another added benefit is, we've been looking to get new medications in the type 1 diabetes space forever. And one of them that's being pushed are these meds called SGLT2 inhibitors. It's an oral medication. It makes us pee sugar out into the urine, but it also contributes to the risk of ketoacidosis. The FDA has been hesitant to approve this because of that fact. So something that would help mitigate the risk of DKA might allow us access to a medication like that, which could benefit a lot of people with type 1 diabetes.
Outside of that medication, I know that Abbott had a symposium where they said that glucose and ketones can often fluctuate independently. So sometimes your glucose levels may look normal, but your ketone levels are higher. Are we seeing that outside of people taking those medications too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, they've studied this in people on pumps where they would stop the pump delivery, and they actually found the ketone levels would start to go up and reach, critical levels before the blood sugar reached dangerously high levels. So before someone got a warning that their blood sugar was high, they'd already know that their ketone level is climbing and could proactively fix the problem and get themselves back on track quickly.
With that, is it possible that we could be having higher elevated ketone levels, not going into DKA, not getting these severe symptoms, but getting, say general malaise just from higher ketones?
Yeah, it could be. And it happens, especially in people on low carb diets, because that predisposes us also to more ketone production. Because the more fat we burn for energy, the more ketones we produce. And when you're on a low carb diet, your body's going to metabolize more fat for fuel. So it's a good way for people to know, when they're getting adequate calories and adequate carbs in their diet for an energy source. Because as ketones start to build up above baseline levels, it does cause malaise, like you said. You get a bit of a brain fog, your energy level is down. So it's also a way to monitor that your diet is on track.
Yeah, I wonder what we'll find from wearing these because, I've been dealing with chronic fatigue, what I've called long COVID, but it's also possible that maybe I do have elevated ketone levels. I've never tested my ketones, and I was diagnosed 4 years ago. I don't know when I should, or I don't know.
Well, Justin, you've also been working your tail off for weeks. That may have something to do with
Definitely
it.
Doesn't help.
Yeah, right now all we have there is a glucose meter called the Precision Extra that has special strips you can insert that measure ketones instead of blood sugar. That's the only other way we can measure ketone levels. The urine strips, you can use those, but they're delayed. It takes hours for ketones in the bloodstream to appear in the urine, and by then, things could be reaching a dangerous situation.
Interesting. Well, I'm cool to see what happens there. There's no timeline yet as to when these are coming, but the fact that pump partners are saying, we're going to integrate it, it feels like they're not, maybe not more than a year away.
Yeah.
So
honestly, in a lot of people's minds, Dexcom has always kind of been the pioneer, the leader in CGM, especially in the type 1 space. And it still has more features than the other systems have. But the gap is narrowing. Abbott and Libre 3 Plus, in terms of its accuracy and all, it's approaching Dexcom quality. So adding another feature like the ability to measure ketones would give Abbott that competitive advantage that might win over a lot of business.
Yeah, and they recently just released a new app that has updated alarm settings, which were a talking point for a lot of people saying they don't want to switch. So yeah, they are pushing forward, which is exciting, right? And also this competition is going to make Dexcom feel a little unsettled and have to work harder too.
Hey, this is where competition is a good thing. They're pushing each other. Dexcom just updated their G7 app, so you can now photograph your meals.
Yeah.
And it'll place them on your graph when the data is downloaded and reviewed, so you can see exactly how different food types are affecting you. It's kind of a neat idea. They're planning, next gen to have the app also estimate the nutrient contents in the photograph. I'm a little skeptical because anytime I've seen these kind of AI systems that try to estimate carbs based on a photo, they never work quite right. So we'll see if that actually works.
Interesting. Yeah, the Aura app, which is the smart fitness ring, that can do that, and it does integrate. That device integrates with the Dexcom Stelo. So we are seeing that with that CGM. That's not for people using insulin. So
how's your experience been with that as far as doing estimates of nutrient content?
I haven't used that feature myself. I had an Aura ring and I returned it because I was like, you want me to pay $400 and then $8 a month just to use it? No, thank you. Even though I really do need to get it back so I can test more and make more content, but I kind of don't love their payment plan on a device that I just paid for.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Abbott, pushing even more forward, their Libre 3 Plus continues to integrate with more and more pumps. So the Twiist it's going to integrate with, and Tandem.
And Tandem, yeah.
Exactly, Tandem's T-Slim. So what do you think of, these new partnerships with Libre 3 Plus?
I love it. I think it, giving users a choice of what we want to use. And it may also benefit people whose insurance plans will only cover specific systems. This is what happens. The health plans, they make deals with the manufacturers. You give us a better price on these and we'll make that our, tier 1. We'll cover that at the best reimbursement rate. So if health plans say, hey, we're only going to cover, this or this for the CGM, now you got choices, you got options. Even Minimed/Medtronic, they paired up with Libre, or at least made that announcement last year. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but even they're leaning towards giving users an option of which CGM to go with.
Yeah. So right now, the one downside of the Libre 3 and all Libre CGMs is that they can only connect to one device at a time, meaning that all of these pumps that work with Libre 3 Plus, there is no Libre app also. So it is up to the pump companies to create their own follow app for parents or whoever you really want following the CGM levels. Twiist has one, Beta Bionics has one, but Tandem doesn't have one. How important do you feel it is that Tandem come out with this follow app?
Well, Tandem users can still use their, like the Dexcom app, and use the follow feature on that.
So you're saying parents would just opt for Dexcom?
Yeah.
At this point,
they can still get it that way.
Yeah.
Or they can go the open source route and use Night Scout.
Well, even Night Scout wouldn't work with Libre 3 Plus connected to the pump because there's just that data is not going anywhere. It's going directly to the pump.
Yeah.
But I did talk to Tandem, some people at their booth, and they mentioned that they're working on it. I don't know, where it is on their list. They only have, so many resources, but I do hope we see that just so that more people have the option to choose with what they want, especially parents. Also, if they're going to integrate the new ketone glucose sensor, I'm sure, it will be a priority for that as well.
I know Tandem. They're working on a patch pump. That's more of a distant project. But their extended wear set is at the FDA waiting for approval, the steady set. And there was some research reported at the conference about Medtronic's extended wear set. Their set is approved for 7 days. Most, like 80% of users, are able to get a full 7 days out of their set. To me, what's more important than the convenience is the fact that the insulin absorbs more steadily and consistently. There's less site problems with their extended wear set. And they showed some data at the conference that time in range is a little bit better with people who are wearing the sets, the extended wear set for 7 days compared to the older sets for 3 days, and a little less hypoglycemia as well.
So this technology, these 7-day sets, are doing something that allows just for, better filtration or for that insulin to really make it in.
It's not just the convenience of changing it once a week. It is also a clinical benefit in terms of more consistent absorption of the insulin.
Gotcha. So yeah, Tandem's steady set received FDA clearance for the 3-day, that same set, and they just entered it in for FDA clearance on the 7-day label for it. And they're not going to release it until they get that 7-day, but hopefully it's imminent. I mean, the fact that it has its 3-day, I'm sure there's not a ton of time and testing that needs to be done further, especially since Medtronic has a 7-day. Maybe that helps them. What about other updates from Minimed? So for people who don't know, Medtronic Diabetes is separating from their parent company, Medtronic, and they are forming a company called Minimed. Some of you may know that name because it's the same name the company was when they were acquired by Medtronic. I like to say that this is the greatest name change since HBO went to HBO Max, went to Max, went to HBO Max. So were there any other updates?
Well, first of all, this was not a move made by choice. Medtronic, it was a forced separation because the diabetes division just wasn't profitable enough for Medtronic, which speaks volumes because when the company was Minimed, 15 years ago and beyond, Al Mann started it, and it was run like a family business, and it was more personal. It was more customer oriented. When Medtronic acquired it, it lost a lot of that. And a lot of healthcare providers felt slighted, and they burned some bridges along the way. So there is potential of going back to being Minimed as more of a privately run company, that they will be able to regain some of the old brand loyalty that they used to have. However, on the other side of the coin, when a division is spun off, it's tough to succeed because they no longer have the enormous R&D budget that a large corporation can bring, nor do they have a large marketing force behind it that a big corporation can bring. So it's a very competitive market in the pump and AID and CGM space right now. They got their work cut out for them. I mean, they got some interesting things in the pipeline. Their new sensor, for one, they've got a tubeless pump in the works, but again, these are things that are years out.
I think the helpful thing they have going is they have a huge market hold on the world. Like, there are many countries in the world that are only Medtronic. They only have access to this company. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's opportunity now for all of the other companies to go out and try to grab that business, but I guess that's one thing going for them. They do have a lot of... Yeah.
You said the key word. Medtronic has these worldwide distribution channels. Minimed does not. Minimed's going to have to build them. I mean, they're going to carry over some of it, but it's not going to be easy for them to survive now. I wish them well. I hope they do, because again, competition's a good thing, and they've been innovators in the past. I think they can be again, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, they have a great algorithm, and I'm excited for the technology that's coming out next. I think it's very competitive. If people want to learn more about it, I've written a lot about it on Diabetic. It's also on my YouTube channel. upcoming 8 series tube pump, their tubeless pump. New tech's great, but being able to execute is important. And I will say I'm hearing from patients in the Netherlands specifically that they are having issues getting Simplera. In fact, they're actually being told to get back on Guardian 4, which is unfortunate. And I reached out to Medtronic about that. They sent me a statement. The statement basically said that they're working to fix it, but it didn't really go beyond that. I can paste Medtronic's statement in the description so people hear exactly what they said. Was there anything else from Minimed besides the 7-day infusion set that you thought was interesting?
Honestly, I did not spend a lot of time at their booth. I mean, I walked through the posters, research posters, and I saw the one about the extended wear set that caught my attention, but I really didn't pick up on much else.
This episode is sponsored by Omnipod. As someone with T1D and with an incredibly active lifestyle, it's important for me not to get tied up, especially with tubes on my insulin pump. I love to go swimming, lift weights, and play kickball with friends. And with Omnipod 5, I never have to worry about tubes getting in the way. Plus, not having to disconnect helps me to stay in range during all of my favorite physical activities. That includes sexy time too. See if you're eligible for a 10-day trial by visiting omnipod.com/diabetic. On there, you'll see full safety and risk information and trial terms. That's omnipod.com/diabetic.
Well, something very exciting, a brand new pump entering the market, officially July 7th, this week, is Twiist. The Twiist insulin pump from Sequel MedTech. It is a sequel to the original pump that Dean Kamen invented. He also invented this, so that's why they called the company Sequel. The Twiist pump, it's like a disc-shaped tubed pump. Yeah, it's exciting to have a new player in the space. What are you excited about? What are your thoughts with this new system?
Well, what really has me excited about this is it's going to open the door for the average consumer to access loop technology. Loop is the build it yourself open source algorithm and user interface that a lot of people use now who don't feel they get enough out of the commercially available systems. But Twiist uses the loop algorithm and and user interface in its hybrid closed loop system. And loop has features that are above and beyond anything that the commercial systems have. Everything is entirely customizable in this system. The target ranges can really vary a lot. The basal settings could be configured just the way you like them. Obviously, carb ratios and the action curves, etc. But to me, what's really key with Loop is it's the only system that considers the food that's still digesting when it's predicting where your blood sugar is going. None of the other systems do that. They look and see, all right, Justin's got 3 units of insulin on board. He's going to tank in the next hour. They don't consider that Justin has some pizza digesting that's going to offset those 3 units of insulin on board. And the Loop app does that. But keep in mind that the Loop app that Twiist is using is several years out of date. It's an older version of it.
It's Loop version 1.0. We're on 3.3 now.
Yeah, we're way beyond that. And a lot of very nice value-added features have been added to the Loop app since that. And this is what happens when you have to go through the FDA. You have to test it and study it and report it, submit it and wait and wait and wait, and you finally get approval. And by that time, I wouldn't say it's obsolete, but it is somewhat a little out of date.
Absolutely. But there is this complete roadmap, 2.3 more versions that they could follow that are having success. They could theoretically get the data the same way they got this current algorithm approved, because they got this cleared using people who were in the open source community's data in some sort of study or trial, right? So theoretically, once they gain the funds, once enough people are using this and they can, gather the funds needed to do that research, there is this roadmap. And there, like you said, there are a lot of great features that this introduces, like the ability to program types of foods. One thing I like is the retroactive carb adjustments. So if you put in 50 carbs and an hour later, you're like, oh, I didn't eat that. Like you can go back and make it 0. Of course, you're probably still going to go low, but
and if you
it knows
forgot
now.
to bolus, you can enter that you ate carbs half an hour ago, and
Yes.
the algorithm adjusts to that. Because with the other systems, if you host enter your carbs, not only are you going to spike, but you're going to go low later because the system already accommodated for the rise in blood sugar. So yeah, there's a lot of smart things built within Loop that users of the system are going to enjoy.
Yeah, and with what you just said, for example, Beta Bionics, if you enter something in 30 minutes late, they're going to use that data to be like, well, this is what happens when you eat those 30 grams of carbs. But it's like you're putting in false data that it's learning.
Right.
So this gives you that fine tuning and the prediction, being able to see that glucose prediction on the app.
So my whole
too.
team we've been detailed on the Twiist system. So we know all the ins and outs of it. What we have not had a chance to do is try it yet. And since everyone on our team had integrated diabetes, we try everything before we'll recommend it or teach patients on it. So as soon as we get a couple of units to try out, everyone here will wear it for a few weeks, maybe beyond, and then be able to provide some firsthand knowledge about it.
Yeah, I've been in touch with them too, and I could be getting on it any week, month now. So
Nice.
we'll have to chat about it. That could be another
Compare
good
notes.
opportunity. For sure. That'll be cool. What are your thoughts on the integration with Eversense 365 with Twiist? So Twiist would be the first insulin pump to partner with the implantable Eversense CGM. That this would be coming, later this year. I think second half of the year. But what are your thoughts on that integration?
I think it's pretty important. I've always felt that the implanted sensor is ideally suited for use with an automated insulin delivery system, because the AID systems, they need sensor data to be making adjustments and decisions. And when you have intermittent breaks in the signal or the data, they don't work well. And the implanted sensor is continuous. There are no warm-up times, change-outs, things like that. So it is true. The accuracy it's a little bit better than what we get with the other commercial CGM systems. So I think it's very well suited for use with a part of an AID program. I'm still not a big fan of having to wear a transmitter on my skin. It takes away some of the benefit of having the sensor implanted in the body. But the Essentia, which owns the company now, they're working on a version where the transmitter is also implanted and lasts the full time. So I think it'll be even more exciting when that's available. Speaking of implantable, I saw and got to play around with an implantable
Glucotrack?
sensor. Glucotrack. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
So this is a 3-year implantation. The key thing is it's not implanted below the skin. When you implant something under the skin, there's going to be lag time. So the blood sugars or the glucose values the sensor gives you are like 5 to 10 minutes old. And in some conditions, like during exercise and when you're low and stressed, the lag time can be 30 to 60 minutes. It can be really long. This Glucotrack sensor is implanted in a blood vessel, in a vein, in the upper chest. And they use cath lab procedures. It's a quick 20-minute procedure in a cath lab under local anesthetic. You're in, you're out. It's very easy. And the sensor and the sensor sits in a blood vessel. The transmitter is also under the skin, so everything is in your body. Works for 3 years. The accuracy is better than what we see with the sensors that are on the market now. And there's no lag time. If your glucose goes up in a second, it'll tell you. It's very efficient and time responsive. So I'm excited. They're doing studies in Europe now, and they'll start doing studies in Europe, in the US next year. So
the study that they're doing is going to be in Australia. That's the one that's coming up.
Australia.
Yeah. And so I had them on the podcast. So if people want to learn all about this and the research done so far, watch that episode. It's fascinating. And I also got to meet with them at ADA, and it's a very exciting piece of tech. I love that it's, accurate, way more accurate or timely. The one downside I'd say to it is the fact, I was holding it to my chest with them, and I asked them, I was like, will I see this? There's this transmitter that's maybe 2 inches, 2.5 inches long, and maybe a half an inch thick. I asked, will I see this on my chest? And they said that yes, there would be like an indent in your chest. And I thought, weighing that versus me putting on, a device on my arm that you don't really see, I don't know if I want that on my chest. I don't know. I'd have to, I guess, put a lot of thought into that. But I asked them, I was like, maybe I wish that there was a way to kind of put it in your like almost your armpit area, that transmitter. But then the lead that goes into the vessel, it's pretty long. Like it could extend over. So,
Sure.
I do know that the way the procedure that gets this in is a very standard procedure, right? Is it pacemakers or what type of device?
Yeah,
like,
it's the same procedure used in putting in pacemakers.
So yeah, they've shown it to doctors or surgeons that do the pacemaker, and they're like, oh yeah, I could do that. When do you want me to do it? Right. So it's a very standard procedure. So that's the cool thing about this, is that people are already getting these implanted, but kind of weighing those costs and benefits of, yeah, I have it for 3 years, but I now have this like indent on my chest. Do I want that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I heard the same comment, and my belief is they're going to refine the procedure so that it won't be noticeable. I think right now, the way they're doing it, you'll see a little bit of a bump on the chest where it's planted, but they'll figure out ways to implant it maybe a little deeper or different spots, so you won't even notice it.
Well, so this leads me to my next question, which is, blood glucose meters. We used to test with our blood, and I know you have some old ones near you.
Oh, yeah, I got to show you these.
Right?
Listen,
well, okay.
You know who Dr. Richard Bernstein is?
I don't.
Richard Bernstein, he's from New York. He passed away last year, but he's sort of the pioneer of very low carb eating for people with diabetes. He lived with diabetes for 60, 70 years, really long time. And very famous in the diabetes space. But when he passed away, his family reached out to me because they knew I have a museum here in my office, and he offered up some of the relics around in his home that he had used years ago. So this is called an Ames reflectance meter. I have
For those listening,
idea.
it looks like a transistor radio. Is that the right word, or just a radio?
It weighs about 5 pounds. It's enormous. I have no idea how this thing works. And there's another one called a StatTech. It's got buttons and dials. The dial is in an algorithmic fashion, and
It's almost like a scale, right? I think it's the way a scale used to work when you stood on it and you had to move around the dial. That's how that one worked. You had to,
and it's almost as big as a bathroom scale. It's close to that size with a giant power cord. And, just to put the technology in perspective of what
we've come very
now.
far. People used to have to plug in their glucose meter just to get a reading and then wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's right.
Well,
I got you off track, but I had to show you
No,
that
it's fine.
stuff.
I mean, it's related, right? So Justin, what is that 30, 40-year-old tech?
50? Probably 50, 60-year-old tech.
Okay, so in 50 years, we've come from plugging in our glucose meter and getting waiting 5 minutes for a reading to now, we're wearing all these disposables and we're seeing these implantables, whether it be Glucotrack or Eversense, which is even trying to, completely implant it. I also had Eversense on the podcast and they talked about the future of their tech. So people should go listen to that. They talk about all the stuff they're working on. They were saying that we don't want to make the transmitter on the outside smaller because we just want to implant the transmitter. Why bother, doing that step when we could just go right inside?
Right.
Do you think that the CGMs of today will kind of be just the old tech, kind of like a glucose meter is this old tech that we use once in a while, and implants are like that next step? Everyone hope, unless we're cured, which I hope, but everyone's just getting these implanted one day, or everyone that has access, of course?
I don't think so. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, oh yeah, that would be great, because the way we inserted sensors was difficult and convoluted, but now the disposable sensors are so small and so easy to put on the body that virtually anybody, and now they have over the counter, you don't even need prescriptions for them. You just get it, you put it on. The implanted sensors require medical procedures to be done, and people are not going to have access to a doctor who can do it, or they're not going to want to have it done. So I think the Dexcom and Abbott don't have much to worry about just yet, but they're gonna have some competition down the road from the implantable ones, especially when a company like it's not Senseonics anymore, it's Essentia, when they have the transmitter fully implanted as well. You don't have to have something on your skin. There's going to be even more traction when that happens.
That's going to be a lot of pressure on Dexcom and Libre, and you'd have to think. It's funny, Dexcom started as an implantable. When early days of Dexcom, that's what they were studying. I don't know if I don't think that ever went out to consumers, but that's what they were doing. Glucotrack, a couple of the people at Glucotrack worked at Dexcom, and so they would talk to me about that. It was cool. But they may have to start to come out with a model if they want to still be competitive in this space. They'll need that.
Competition is good.
Absolutely. Now, back to pumps for a second. Beta Bionics, they showed off at an investor meeting during ADA this brand new tubeless pump that they've been talking about for some time. It's called MINT, which stands for mini insulin therapy. So this is a semi-reusable pump. There's two pieces. One is like the brains that is reusable for up to 2 years. And then there's the disposable, which is hardware connected to a patch adhesive that you put on, connect the two, and then the disposable, actually, that's where the batteries are stored. So that powers the brains. There's never recharging. Right. There's actually one less battery in it. So it's 33% less battery waste than an Omnipod. 200 unit cartridge, and interestingly, a manual needle inserter. So just first off, what are your thoughts on this? I know they say by end of 2027, but what do you think of this new design that they're showing?
Well, a couple of years ago, Embecta, which is a spin-off of BD, developed a very similar product. It had a manual cannula insertion. It was just a button press, basically. But it was modular, where you had, like you said, you have a disposable part with the cannula, the power source, and the insulin reservoir, and then a durable part that has all the electronics, the computer aspects, and so on. And it brings an economy of scale so that the cost per unit comes down quite a bit. So when you have to replace an Omnipod, you're replacing everything, including things that could be used for long term. So there's waste, there's inefficiency, etc. And from a user standpoint, if you have an infusion site that is not working well, you have to throw the whole pump away, versus with a modular system, you could just change the infusion, the disposable part. So there's some advantages there. Honestly, I mean, Medtronic is developing a similar concept. Tandem's working on a similar concept. I'm not putting my eggs in these baskets because these are years off, and a lot can change in a few years' time. What they say is going to happen in 2027 may not happen until 2030. It may never happen. The company may go in a different direction. The market interest could change. The technology could change rapidly. There could be a cure. I don't know. But yeah, honestly, I don't bother investing my time and energy into things that are still years away.
Yeah, I had originally put this on the list of things to talk about, and you deleted it from the list. I was like, no, Gary, we are talking about this because it's fun and cool, and I'm excited about it. So there's also, they say, so it's a manual needle that goes in, and it is a 4.5 millimeter steel needle. They say that that's the smallest needle of any insulin pump. What are your thoughts on a pump having that?
It doesn't matter much. The Omnipod cannula is longer, but because it goes in at an angle, the depth is the same as the 4.5 millimeter.
Well, do you think this could help with like occlusions versus because Omnipod will have issues with that sometimes because of needles, that Teflon.
Any steel needle with any pump helps with occlusions. You're rarely going to get occlusions with a steel needle set. You're also not going to get kinking, which causes a lot of the inflammatory problems under the skin that impairs absorption. So a lot of our patients use steel needle sets. but the others use angled sets. So we rarely
Yeah.
use the 90-degree cannula or soft cannulas. Those are the most problematic ones.
Gotcha. So this tubeless pump would have whatever current algorithm the Beta Bionics islet has at the time. So at this point, it would have the current one. What are you seeing with the current islet algorithm? So this algorithm, there's no carb entries. They're just saying like, how big your meal size is and, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What is the community's experience with this algorithm?
There's no such thing as a free lunch. If you don't put work in, you're not going to get the same results. And I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are not willing or able to put work into their diabetes management. And for those folks, the algorithm in the islet can work wonders for them. I mean, it can really get them from having suboptimal or poor control to being, within a reasonable range most of the time. I still find that people who want to manage themselves intensively, who want to be able to make their own adjustments to life situations, do struggle a bit because there's not a lot you can do on that system to make your own adjustments. For them, using either a commercial system, different commercial system, or an open source type system gives them more options.
Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes.
Speaking of algorithms, you said that there were updates on algorithms that would get around carb entry. What were you seeing at ADA for that?
Yeah, some interesting research. Some of it really surprised me. Is we've always taught our patients how to really do the best job possible with their carb counting, and we emphasize the timing of the food and all this and that. But there were a couple of studies that looked at algorithms that did not require detailed carb entries. Some of them required no carb entries at all. You just eat, the algorithm will figure out what to do after you've eaten and increase your insulin. And they were better than what we've seen in the past. They were getting upwards of like 65% time in range. Because if you go through a day and don't eat and still have 65% time in range, that's pretty good. So they figured out that if the algorithms are more aggressive in the upfront delivery when glucose is rising, they're able to achieve that kind of control. Medtronic did a study with its 780G. Looking at fixed carb entries. In other words, just announcing I'm eating, not specifically how much, but just a fixed amount of carb to enter. And with their 780G advanced algorithm, they were getting upwards of 75% in range without
just by pressing a button. I'm eating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, putting fixed carb amounts in. And those who were able to vary the carb amount even a little bit were getting around 80% in range. And the Barbara Davis Center in Colorado did some studies with kids, and they found that just using a small, medium, large approach, where they would assign 30, 60, 90 grams or 20, 40, 60, using those kind of entries, they were getting around 66% of time in range with an approach like that. So, if somebody's not, overly concerned about getting 80, 90% of time in range, they can manage pretty darn well just putting a carb estimate in. But to not put any carbs in, not let the system know at all, it's still a bit of a challenge. What's really blew me away is there's so much energy and so much brain power going into figuring out how to get around carb entries. If we put half as much energy into behavioral science, into just how do we get people to enter carbs, we wouldn't need the alternative. We wouldn't need a system that doesn't require carb entry. So
Yeah, I mean,
6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right?
yeah, that's true. So what about when it comes to type 2s with AID systems? There was some information that came out there, or type 2 medications.
Well, use of type 2 medications in patients with type 1, especially those who are on automated insulin delivery systems, we know that those medications, namely the GLP-1 receptor agonists and the SGLT2 inhibitors, those are improved for type 2, not for type 1 use, but a lot of people with type 1 use them. I mean, a high percent, we're getting up to around 20% people with type 1 using these meds now. They have benefits in terms of weight management, in terms of kidney health, cardiovascular health, in addition to diabetes. So I think it behooves us to know how to use these safely and effectively in people with type 1. So we know that insulin sensitivity improves with weight loss. So that's one adjustment that folks have to make when they use those meds. But there's also changes in how the body produces glucagon when these meds are used, specifically the GLP-1 meds. So most people who start on or on an AID system and begin using a GLP-1, things like Mounjaro, Ozempic, etc., are going to need to make adjustments to their basal and bolus insulin doses. The people presenting at ADA said that both needed to be adjusted. I found, at least in our practice, that it's mostly the basal that needs adjustment. Because when someone starts eating less, they're naturally going to bolus less. And that's what happens with these meds is they end up eating less.
Have there been studies yet on people who are using GLP-1s alongside automated insulin systems and how that affects the need to bolus or not? Because, I've had people on this show who are using open source Trio on GLP-1s, not bolusing and getting over 85 to 90% time in range.
Yeah, it's achievable, but mainly if your diet is, if you're eating modest amounts and
she was eating Cinnabons,
mostly
high carb diet. But this again was Trio.
Okay. Well, even
a more
with
advanced
Trio,
algorithm. Okay.
You might be able to get away with that once in a while and achieve still a high time in range, but you're still going to have to be careful about what you're eating if you don't want to bolus at all. You're obviously going to have better control if you announce what you're eating. But with these systems now, like Trio especially, and even with 780G, people can achieve better control than they have in the past because the algorithms are just a little bit more aggressive. Personally, I haven't found I can get away with that. If I eat carb-laden foods and don't bolus, I'm skyrocketing. If I eat very low carb foods, low glycemic, slow digesting foods, the algorithm will often take care of it for me and I don't have to announce it.
I know that there was some research that came out with U500 Humalog. So this would be 5 times more potent than the U100 that many people are already taking. There is a U200, which is 2 times stronger, but this has the potential to help people who are insulin resistant, right? So what are the implications of an insulin that is ultra concentrated like this?
When we hear U500, we immediately think of U500 regular, because that's been out for decades. U500 regular insulin is ungodly slow. I mean, it's slower than regular insulin. It takes like 4 to 8 hours to peak. It's really, really slow. So it's not a practical mealtime insulin to use. The U500 Humalog retains the characteristics of Humalog. It's a rapid-acting insulin, peaks in an hour. So it has potential to be used in pump therapy, AID systems, multiple injection therapy very effectively. And one of the things that's restricted access to some of the tech is people who just require enormous amounts of insulin. If they take, over 100 units a day, it's hard to use pens, it's hard to use pumps because they just don't hold that much insulin. So the U500 certainly could open the door to more people who want to use technology. I'm not sure if the companies that make the pumps and the pens are going to get approval for use of U500. It'll have to be prescribed off label. But we're doing that now with U200 Humalog quite a bit. Anybody who's using 60 to 100 units a day can easily use U200 Humalog, and it basically doubles the volume of insulin that they're able to put in their pen or their pump.
There are so many people with type 2. That's a growing a group of people who are starting to use the tech. Do you think that there is incentive to start doing more testing with U500 and if the U200, if it's needed for people with type 2 on these AID systems using these pens?
I would think so. I would hope so. But since they haven't done it for the U200 yet, I don't know if they will for the U500 either. But keep in mind, there's a lot of type 1s who are also very insulin resistant. You can have type 1 and be insulin resistant, have type 2 as well. So it'll help anybody who's requiring large doses.
Yeah, it sounds like this research is needed. And it's something that opened my eyes for is, in the past I've talked about, why don't our tubeless pumps have a 300 unit, chamber, which would be great if we're using U100 and we want to get a 7-day lifespan out of the pump.
Sure.
But if we started using U200 and, theoretically that could help us, get more longevity.
The pumps can be smaller, which is something everybody wants, is a smaller thing on their body. That's a goal. Now, the other insulin news is around the ultra rapid insulins, Fiasp and Lumjev. They have a slightly faster action curve than Humalog and Novolog. So they were studied in AID systems just to see if the glucose control improved, and it did. It was only a small amount. It was like 1.5% more time in range, but also a little bit less hypoglycemia. So there is an advantage to using those in pumps and in AID systems. The main benefit is in the after meal phase. The glucose just isn't going to spike quite as high, so you spend more time within your target zone and less variability.
Yeah. I'll never forget the first podcast you ever came on here. We were talking about the future of tech, and one of the things you mentioned was a pump that has 3 hormones: glucagon, insulin, and amylin. That was the first time I ever heard of what amylin was. And I know that there was some talk about amylin at this conference. Can you tell everyone what amylin is? And I know that it kind of was maybe going away, but now there's this new potential hope here.
Amylin is it's sort of like Robin is to Batman. Everyone's all excited about Batman. Who wants to go watch a movie, Robin too? But Robin helps Batman, helps him get the job done. That's what amylin does for insulin. Amylin's normally secreted by the beta cells along with insulin. They're secreted at the same time. Amylin's main job is to slow the appearance of sugar in the bloodstream so that the insulin doesn't get overwhelmed. And it does that by slowing digestion, blocking glucagon production, and also blocking appetite, inhibiting hunger. So without the amylin hormone, our food digests faster than it should, and our appetites are greater than they should be. And we had the ability to replace the amylin hormone for the last 15 years with a drug called Simplera. But it wasn't accepted all that well because of a lot of side effects, a lot of nausea that came with it. And it's complicated to use. It has to be injected almost every time you eat. So it never grew in popularity. And the company that makes it is now discontinuing it as of September. But the amylin hormone still plays a critical role in glucose homeostasis management. So there are companies now that are looking at co-formulating amylin along with insulin, or co-formulating it with other medications that seem to have a beneficial effect on glucose levels. Even looking at co-formulating it with a GLP-1 medication, so that it provides weight loss, glucose management, multiple advantages. But it looks like the days of just taking amylin by itself are done. But seeing it in combination with other hormones, we may see some growth in that in the coming years.
Wow. So are you saying that theoretically one day we could have some sort of mixture that has insulin and amylin in it together that I put into my insulin pump, and they regulate together.
Yeah. The studies that were presented at the conference showed tremendous weight loss when you combined the amylin hormone with a GLP-1. We're talking 22-25% weight loss in like a 4-month period in some cases. So the two together, the GLP-1 and the amylin, seem to have additive effects in benefiting people who want to lose weight, as well as the glucose stability, because the foods digest much more slowly when those medications are used.
And there was some exciting research done on and findings when it comes to islet cell therapies. One is Vertex came out with a release saying that they cured 10 of 12 patients. This is out of their, 52 patients they have. So 12 of these patients, 10 of them were cured in their VX880 trial. They did require immunosuppressants. And what's interesting here is that the cells used were grown in a lab, which could help with, just the scaling problems that come with using these cells. What stuck out to you with this Vertex trial?
Well, the fact that it still requires immunosuppression.
Yeah.
I mean, that tempered my enthusiasm quite a bit. There's immunosuppression and there's immunosuppression. There's very mild temporary treatments, and there's long-term, more severe treatments that can have a wide array of side effects on the body. And I think most people, the vast majority of people, the benefit risk ratio is still not where it needs to be with that kind of process. I'm thrilled that they're making headway with cell viability and functionality, because ultimately you have to have that. But protecting the cells and not requiring immunosuppression, that's the gold standard we're all hoping for.
Yeah, someone came up to me and they were like, "Justin, did you hear about Vertex? Like, it's huge." I was like, "Okay, like what happened?" He was like, "Well, 10 out of 12, blah, blah, blah." And they required, well, he didn't. I was like, "But did it require immunosuppressants?" He was like, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Okay, like what's the deal?" I mean, I guess, these cells being grown in a lab used for this, I mean, that's huge, right? Like, if we could just grow all these cells and then give them away and not need immunosuppressants, fantastic. But we're still behind there, and their VX264 trial, which wouldn't have required immunosuppressants, failed. It didn't work out. So, I'm hopeful, but also you got to stay realistic.
Before the ADA meeting, I went to the Diabetes Mind D-Data Exchange, and they had a really good presentation about islet cell therapies and some of the techniques that they're using to try to get around the need for immunosuppression, or at least minimize it. There's a company, Cernova, who's got a pouch that is used to protect the cells initially, and then it's removed once those cells have adequate blood flow. And the long-term survival of those cells was excellent. It's a company called Sana Biotechnology, and they're using a really innovative approach. And they recognize that when a baby is developing in the womb, it's not attacked by the mother's immune system, even though it's got half the father's DNA and half the mother's. So they're utilizing enzymes that are from the embryonic sac as a way to keep the immune system from attacking what's inside. They're using that approach to protect the cells inside, and they've seen results with it with no immunosuppression required at all. And there's another company, Symbio Cell Tech. They're using things called MSCs. These are mesenchymal stem cells, which are sort of, I wouldn't say immune to autoimmune attack, but seem to have some type of inherent protection. And they found single donors can produce hundreds of therapeutic doses of these MSC cells to offer protection against immune attacks. So there's progress being made. It's still worthwhile research, but again, it's something it's still years off.
Yeah, and it's great to see all these different techniques being used. We had Cernova and SAB Bio, or SAB Bio, those two companies have come on the podcast to talk about their research, and it's exciting to see what they're doing. So yeah, it was good to see other ones there. I would love to have Sana and the other company you mentioned come on the show as well to talk about their approaches. Well, I think that is time. Gary, thank you so much for coming on. This was so interesting. I'm glad we got into some tech and then also all this other stuff that I missed, because when I'm at these conferences, I'm running around the show floor and seeing all the tech that I don't have the time to go into all of these meetings, but I wish I did. And I know I do have access to watch them, but then I'm like, busy creating content after ADA.
And you
so
do
it's great to have you
job
on.
of it. And you're like the best barber who's got the worst haircut. I mean, you got a nice haircut. I'm just using a metaphor. But I know your glucose levels were bouncing around a fair amount. So you're going to start working with some members of the integrated diabetes team to see about stabilizing things a little bit. And we'll teach you some creative tricks.
Loop, I have fantastic results, but there have been some unexplained highs and lows that I'd like to work with you all with and get to know what your services are and stuff. So I'm excited for that. It'll be great.
Can't wait to work with you.
Yeah. So have a great July 4th, everyone. Everyone listening, I guess you had a great July 4th, but yeah, it was so great talking to you.
You too, Justin. Have a good one.
What are your thoughts on what's coming out of this year's scientific sessions? Let me know in the comments the research, the tech, or something that we brought up today that resonated with you. That way we can start this dialogue. And as always, let me know the content you want to hear more about on this show. I'm looking at those comments. I may not be able to answer all of you, but I see what you're saying and you inspire me to come out with more content that you're asking for. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.